She had always known the world in a way that others couldn't. While most children her age were learning to read and write without much trouble, she was learning to navigate life in darkness. Losing her eyesight at a very young age had changed everything, but it had not broken her. Instead, it had given her an extraordinary sense of hearing. Every sound, every note, every vibration felt sharper, clearer, more alive. And for her, the piano became more than an instrument, it became a voice. A way to speak when words were not enough. Every day, she would sit in her small room, feeling the keys with her fingers, letting the music flow from her heart. Neighbors often heard melodies floating out from the windows, soft at first, then swelling with emotion. Even though she could not see the notes, she could feel them. Every scale, every chord, every pause was something she understood deeply, as if the music was a part of her body. It was her escape, her safe place, and her way of telling the world that she had something to give, but life was not easy. People often judged her before they listened. Teachers doubted her abilities. Strangers stared, whispering behind her back, questioning how a blind girl could ever play something complex or meaningful. There were days when the weight of their doubt felt heavier than darkness itself. She heard it all, and at times it hurt more than she wanted to admit. Yet she never stopped. Every criticism became fuel. Every whisper of doubt reminded her that she had to prove not to them, but to herself that her talent mattered. One day, news spread through her town that a prestigious music event was going to take place in the city. It was the kind of event that attracted the best musicians, the kind of event where people watched with critical eyes and high expectations. The guest of honor was a famous pianist, someone who had performed in countless concerts around the world, whose talent was widely celebrated. For most people, this event was about prestige and recognition, but for her, it was a challenge she had to take, not for fame, but to see what she was truly capable of. When she arrived at the venue, she felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. The hall was enormous, filled with bright lights, polished floors, and an audience that seemed to stretch endlessly. She could hear the soft chatter of the crowd, the rustling of programs, the gentle tuning of other pianos. Her heart pounded as she approached the stage area, not knowing what awaited her. She had faced judgment before, but something about this room made it feel sharper, heavier, more intense. Her first encounter with the famous pianist left her uneasy. He noticed her immediately, not for the talent she carried, but for the fact that she could not see. There was a flicker of doubt in his eyes, quickly replaced by a small smirk. She could hear the quiet whisper that followed among the audience and assistants, the subtle questioning of whether she belonged in such a space. Some comments were polite but dismissive. Others were openly mocking. She felt their eyes, their judgments, their disbelief pressing against her, but she refused to respond. Silence, she decided, would be her shield. As the day progressed, the whispers grew louder. Some laughed when she took her seat at a piano, as if expecting her to fail. Others openly doubted she could play even a simple melody. The pianist himself, who had performed for thousands and judged countless competitions, seemed to treat her presence as a joke. He said nothing directly to her, but the tone, the glance, and the atmosphere said enough. It was as if the room was already certain of her failure, and yet she did not let it break her. She had faced skepticism all her life. She had learned to carry her dreams quietly, to let her fingers speak when her voice could not. Every note she had ever played had been practiced for this moment, even if she did not know it. She closed her eyes, not to shut out the world, but to focus on the music that had always been her true companion. She remembered the countless hours spent feeling the keys, memorizing songs by touch, and letting her fingers create what her eyes could not see. It was not about proving anyone wrong. It was about proving to herself that she could rise above doubt when the time came. She politely requested permission to play. There was hesitation. The organizers and the pianist glanced at each other, unsure whether it was a good idea to let her perform in front of such an elite audience. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Could she really do it? Would she stumble, make mistakes, embarrass herself? The tension in the room was thick, almost suffocating, but she did not waver. She simply nodded, moved her hands carefully along the keys, and prepared to play. As she sat at the piano, the whispers slowly faded. People instinctively leaned forward, drawn to the unusual sight of a young blind girl about to face one of the most intimidating stages of her life. There was a moment of stillness, a breath held by everyone in the room. No one spoke. Even the famous pianist watched silently, curiosity and skepticism warring in his expression. He had performed in grand halls for countless audiences, but this moment felt different. Something about her presence suggested that this would not be an ordinary performance. Yet the room had been primed to expect failure, and the weight of doubt pressed down heavily. She placed her fingers on the keys, feeling the cool surface beneath her touch. The first notes were soft, almost hesitant, as if testing the space, the atmosphere, and the audience itself. Then, gradually, the music began to flow. What started as a gentle melody grew into something richer, deeper, more expressive. Each note seemed to carry a story, a fragment of her journey, a reflection of the struggles she had faced and the strength she had discovered within herself. She played not to impress, not to compete, but to express, and in doing so, she began to capture the attention of everyone in the room. At first, the audience was uncertain. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unsure how to react. They had expected awkwardness, mistakes, maybe even embarrassment, and instead, they were hearing something that demanded respect. Her fingers moved with confidence, yet there was a vulnerability in the music, a raw honesty that could not be ignored. Even the famous pianist, whose smirk had seemed unshakable, leaned slightly forward, curiosity replacing judgment. He had underestimated her, and now he had to confront the possibility that he had been wrong. As the melody continued, the story within the music became clear. There was a tension, a rise and fall, moments of light and shadow. It was as if her fingers were painting emotions that words could not capture. She had transformed doubt into beauty, ridicule into expression. Each chord resonated through the hall, reaching the ears and hearts of every listener. People began to sit straighter, some with widened eyes, others with their hands clutched lightly in anticipation. The room was no longer filled with skepticism. It was filled with attention, awe, and wonder. Even without seeing her, the audience could feel her journey through the music. They sensed the struggles she had overcome, the countless hours of practice, the inner battles she had fought quietly. Every note carried authenticity, and authenticity is something that cannot be faked. She was not playing to impress or to prove herself to anyone but her own heart, and that honesty made her performance powerful, unforgettable. By the time she finished the piece, the room was silent. For a moment, no one moved, no one spoke, as if collectively realizing what they had just witnessed. The famous pianist's expression had changed completely. Gone was the smirk, replaced by respect and humility. He had expected failure, or at best, mediocrity, and instead he had been presented with raw, undeniable talent. The silence lingered, heavy and meaningful, before the first faint claps began. They grew steadily, swelling into full applause as the audience recognized the courage, skill, and heart behind her performance. She rose from the piano slowly, her own heart racing, but with a quiet satisfaction. She had faced ridicule, doubt, and skepticism, yet she had played with everything she had inside. She did not need words to express her victory. The music itself had done that. Even in silence, she had spoken louder than anyone could have imagined, and in that moment she realized something important. Life would always have doubters, critics, and people ready to judge before understanding. But those moments of judgment, no matter how sharp, could never touch the power of true talent and determination. She had learned that the quiet, patient pursuit of one's passion, even in the face of mockery, could create moments that left a lasting impression far greater than any words could. As she walked away from the piano, she felt a calm pride. This was not about defeating anyone, not about making them realize her worth. It was about honoring the music inside her, letting it speak, and trusting that the world would hear what mattered most. And in that silent, personal victory, she knew that she had begun something greater than applause. Greater than recognition, it was the start of a story that would inspire long after this day had ended. The first notes had already captivated the audience, but she was far from finished. As her fingers glided across the piano keys, the room seemed to change around her. What had once been skepticism, whispers, and doubt turned into stillness, a collective silence that demanded attention. Each note she played felt deliberate, each chord resonated with a story that went beyond music. She wasn't playing for applause or recognition. She was letting the music speak for her, telling a story that words could never fully capture. The melody grew richer, stronger, and more complex. She had prepared for moments like this all her life. Every challenge, every lonely hour of practice, every judgmental glance had led her here. She played as if her fingers were extensions of her emotions, translating struggle, hope, and determination into sound. The audience, once doubtful, could feel it in their hearts. The music was no longer just notes. It was an experience, a journey that drew everyone into her world. Even the famous pianist, who had once smirked and whispered behind his hand, was silent. He leaned closer, watching the precision of her fingers, the expression in her posture, the emotion in every chord. For a moment, it seemed he had forgotten to breathe, so consumed was he by what he was hearing. He had seen countless performers, many with perfect sight and years of training, but this was different. There was an honesty here, a raw talent that could not be taught or bought. She moved seamlessly from one piece to another, each transition smooth and natural. The audience noticed her mastery not because she was visually flawless, but because her music carried life in it. There were moments of tension where her fingers flew across the keys in a storm of passion, moments of softness that made listeners lean forward, holding their breath, and moments of silence that were more powerful than sound itself. She played with such precision that it was impossible to believe she could not see the keys. The hall, once filled with judgmental murmurs, was now alive with emotion. Eyes widened, hands gripped seats, and some of the audience members felt tears form in their eyes. People who had doubted her before now had no choice but to recognize her courage, her talent, and her heart. The energy of the room shifted. The atmosphere was no longer one of criticism, but of awe, respect, and inspiration. Her performance wasn't about showing off. It was about telling her story. Every note reflected the struggle she had endured, the isolation of her blindness, the countless moments of doubt, the ridicule she faced from people who assumed she couldn't achieve greatness. But it also reflected her triumphs, the hours she spent perfecting her craft, the determination that refused to let anyone else define her worth, and the deep love she had for music. She played not to prove them wrong, but to express the truth that had always lived within her. The pianist, now fully aware of her skill, felt a mix of surprise, humility, and admiration. His earlier judgment had been harsh, and he realized he had underestimated not just her talent but her courage. He had assumed she would falter under the pressure, that her disability would limit her abilities, that the performance would be weak. But here she was, shattering every expectation with each note she played. For the first time in his long career, he was confronted with a performance that left him speechless. The audience began to react, softly at first, then more loudly. The first claps came from the back, hesitant, unsure if they should break the silence. But as the last notes lingered in the air, the applause swelled, filling the room with a wave of appreciation. People stood from their seats, some moved to tears, others nodding with deep respect. The music had done what words could not. It had silenced doubt and replaced it with recognition of true talent. She played her final chord, holding it just long enough for the sound to resonate through the hall. The room was completely silent for a heartbeat, as if the audience collectively realized what they had just witnessed. Then, as if on cue, a wave of standing applause erupted. People clapped, cheered, and whistled, some calling out in excitement, others simply standing in awe. The recognition she had never sought had arrived not because she demanded it, but because it was earned in the most honest way possible. The pianist approached her slowly, a look of respect now on his face. The smirk was gone, replaced by a quiet humility. He extended his hand, acknowledging the courage and skill she had displayed. His voice, calm but filled with sincerity, said, "I underestimated you. I was wrong. Your music, it's extraordinary." She smiled softly, a mixture of relief, pride, and quiet triumph. It wasn't about winning approval, but this acknowledgement felt like a gentle confirmation that persistence and passion could break through even the toughest doubts. She rose from the piano, feeling both exhausted and exhilarated. The journey to this moment had not been easy. It had been filled with challenges, moments of fear, and countless nights of practice. But every note she had played tonight carried the weight of all those experiences. She had faced ridicule, criticism, and skepticism, and yet she had risen above them with grace, strength, and unshakable determination. The performance had not just been a display of technical skill, it had been a testament to resilience, courage, and the power of believing in oneself. People in the audience were talking, some still in awe, some still wiping tears from their eyes. They had come expecting a performance, perhaps a moment of entertainment, but what they had witnessed was something far more profound. It was a story of overcoming, of rising above doubt, of showing the world that talent and dedication are not defined by physical limitations. Her music had touched hearts in a way that no words could. Even after the applause had died down, whispers of admiration continued. People discussed her ability, her courage, and the deep emotion in her performance. The story of the blind girl who had been ridiculed by a famous pianist spread quickly, and it was easy to understand why. She had transformed an experience of doubt and mockery into one of inspiration and hope. She had reminded everyone that true ability is not about appearance or perception, it is about heart, dedication, and the willingness to rise above challenges. Backstage, she allowed herself a quiet moment to breathe. Her fingers still tingled from the performance, her heart still raced with adrenaline. But beneath it all was a deep sense of fulfillment. She had faced judgment, ridicule, and doubt, and she had played her truth. That truth had resonated with everyone who listened, touching them in ways that went beyond skill or technique. It had touched them because it was authentic, because it came from a place of honesty and courage. In the days and weeks that followed, her story traveled far and wide. News outlets, social media, and music communities shared the tale of the blind girl, whose performance had stunned a world-famous pianist and moved audiences to tears. She became an inspiration, not because she was blind, but because she had never let her circumstances define her limits. She had shown that determination, passion, and authenticity could overcome even the harshest skepticism. People who had once doubted her talent now praised her skill, and she remained humble throughout. She knew that the performance was not the end, it was a beginning. It was a statement that talent is universal, that obstacles can be overcome, and that the power of perseverance can create moments that inspire countless others. Her journey was far from over, but this chapter had left an unforgettable mark, and so she continued to play, letting her music tell her story. She played in quiet rooms, grand halls, and small gatherings, always with the same dedication, always with the same honesty. She had faced the judgment of the world and turned it into a song that no one could ignore. She had shown that the human spirit, when guided by passion and courage, could create beauty that defies expectation and silences doubt. Her performance had taught everyone watching a simple but powerful lesson. Greatness is not defined by circumstance, by appearance, or by opinion. It is defined by the courage to pursue what you love, to give your all, and to rise above the doubts of others. And in that lesson, she had left an impact far greater than applause or recognition. It was a story of inspiration, hope, and the undeniable power of believing in yourself. The hall that once echoed with whispers of doubt now carried a message of hope. Her music had turned ridicule into admiration, doubt into respect, and darkness into light. The blind girl had shown the world that true talent knows no boundaries, that determination can overcome obstacles, and that the voice of the heart is always louder than the voice of criticism. And as she walked away from the stage, she did so knowing that she had not only played for herself, but for anyone who had ever been underestimated, judged, or told they could not succeed. She had played for everyone, and in doing so, she had dazed the whole world.